Hi Chefeteers, I'm Chef Nakia and I want you to be more confident in the kitchen. And to me, part of that confidence comes with having a positive relationship with food and experiencing joy when we eat and not wasting our time with any guilt or stress or shame around food. So a few weeks ago, I shared a video with you all where I was talking about some common misconceptions about counting calories and nutrient density in food. And if you haven't watched it yet, you can go on back and watch it. You can definitely finish watching this video and then go back to the other one, but I may be referencing a few things here and there. And also, there were a few people who were not very happy with that video. And I get it. It's a touchy subject because health is so individual. I am not trying to prescribe what you should or should not do around food. My big thing is each person individually listening to their own internal body's cues, not external cues. So that includes me. It also includes all of diet culture and magazines and sometimes even food packaging, podcasts, TV shows, and then just in day-to-day life. You hear a lot of people talking about how they are deciding what to eat. Sometimes people are talking about how they view their bodies. And so while these are two separate things, what we eat and how we feel about our bodies, a lot of times whenever people are trying to get you to buy their products, they interweave them so that you buy what they are selling you to try to achieve some sort of goal that may or may not be realistic. And I kind of got on a little bit of a soapbox. That's not the goal of this video. This one is just to explain a little bit more about the nutritional data sheet that comes on packaged foods. So as you're reading through that, if you choose to read it, you have a full understanding of how those numbers were calculated and how they may or may not apply to you individually. Because health is individual, it's so unique and nuanced, and every single person is going to be different. And the way that you eat is nobody's business except for your own. Okay, so this is what we are talking about today, the nutrition data label, and I'm not quite sure if the camera is going to focus in on it well or not. But this is found on all packaged foods. So I have super simple canned pumpkin here, one ingredient, and then we have Nutella, which is a couple of ingredients, but it's typically eaten as a component of other things. And then boxed mac and cheese also has a label there. And I have this one as an example because this is something that you might eat as a full meal. So as you're looking at a nutrition facts panel label, one of the first things you'll see is the serving size. Have you ever wondered why the serving size is the amount that it is? How did they figure that out? So serving sizes are based on the RACC, which stands for Reference Amount Customarily Consumed. So this is a big table and it lists the ingredients and then associated quantities. And those are listed in grams, and then typically whenever a food manufacturer is creating the label on the packaging, they'll take that amount in grams and convert it to household quantities, so like tablespoons, cups, etc. If the package it's sold in is intended to be like a one serving size package, then that's when you'll see like one each. Technically, a packaged food could be considered just one serving as long as it is not more than 200% of the quantity in that RACC table. So, serving size is considered the customarily eaten amount of this food. And there's definitely going to be some inconsistency around like how much of that food you want to eat versus somebody else is going to want to eat. So you may or may not be eating the serving size. So whenever you are looking at the package, if you're reading that label, think about how much you do actually want to eat. And I urge you to eat until you feel satisfied and not eat to try to meet this arbitrary number. It doesn't know what kind of day you're having. It doesn't know how hungry you are. It doesn't know how many more opportunities you're gonna have to eat because of your busy schedule that day. So eat until you feel satisfied. And if you're interested in learning more about this RACC table and like what is recommended as for serving sizes for different foods, I will post a couple links in the description of this video that will take you to like the FDA website and some other places where you can do a little bit more and read more about its history and how all these numbers came to be. They typically do a survey and take into account like what people are self-reporting that they would eat, if there's already a recommendation from a food manufacturer or authoritative organization, and also from the recommendations that other countries use. So that especially applies to foods that maybe haven't been available in the US for very long and it's being imported more often now. So we can take, or they will take the recommended serving size quantities from countries and institute them here. Just a little personal story. There is a cookie company that like delivers cookies and they're known to be pretty big. And I don't know about you, but even if the cookie's this large, I'm probably gonna eat most of it in one sitting. If I'm eating that cookie, I'm probably gonna eat the whole cookie. If not in one sitting, maybe like throughout the day or half day. Whenever you look it up, the recommended serving size is actually 1/4 of a cookie. And so I know personally, I'd be eating 4 servings of cookie. And I don't really think about it very often, but if it was something that I was thinking about, I might have thought, oh, I'm eating 1 serving of this cookie because it's a cookie. Truly, it would be 4 servings of that cookie. Not that big of a deal, but just something for you to be aware of so that you are making, you are using these numbers as accurately as you can to inform your decisions, if this is how you're choosing to make food decisions. And then next on the label, you'll see the number of servings per container. Pretty self-explanatory. Really the only thing to note here is that the volume weight on the package can be up to 20% wrong of the actual product in the package. All right, and then you'll see the amounts per serving, calories. It's always like huge font and bolded and all of this stuff. And so it'll call out the number of calories in the product, and then as you go down, it will explain to you like where those calories come from. So let's do a very quick review here. So calories are a unit of energy. It's a measurement of energy. So it's an estimate of how much energy we might be able to absorb from that food. If you want more detail on this, go back to that first video, and I think it's labeled why it's impossible to accurately calorie count. And here's the thing is there can be some variability because food is a living organism, and based on the soil and how it was grown and when it was picked and how it was processed, all that stuff, the nutrient density can change. So it's an estimate of what the food even holds in nutrients. And then on top of that, we still aren't sure how our bodies are going to digest the food and how much we will absorb. So let's just use the Nutella, for example. So it says that there are 200 calories per serving, but that is 200 that your body could potentially absorb. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to. So depending on our hormones and our stress levels, there's a lot of environmental issues, and then like what you're doing throughout your days, what you're eating foods with, as some foods will help others get digested and will help your body absorb more nutrients. So there's a lot of variability as to how much your body is actually going to absorb. So just keep that in mind, in that these are estimates. They're not necessarily correct, like perfectly accurate, and all of our bodies are so different. And so the way that our bodies absorb and interact with these nutrients is going to be unique and individual. So as you look down the list, you will see fats, and then you'll see like saturated fat and trans fat broken out. You have to do that. There's laws around how things must be listed. Same with sugars. You'll see like total carbohydrates, and you'll see like X grams of added sugars. And then for protein, you'll see that called out. So those are our 3 macronutrients: fat, protein, and carbohydrates. And macronutrients means that we can get energy from those nutrients. Micronutrients are things like vitamins and minerals that are very important for our body, but they won't give us energy. So they're important in a different way. So the macronutrients are typically, well, no, they are stated in grams. The micronutrients are stated in either micrograms or milligrams. So these micronutrients are stated in smaller quantities because it would be pretty difficult to get like 8 grams of calcium, just straight calcium, in a food. And whenever they have the grams listed out here, it's referencing the serving size, not the full package. So if it says that there's 8 micrograms of vitamin A, that's in 1 serving, not the entire package. So keep that in mind. And these labels are intended to be a communication tool and a resource for consumers to understand what products consist of. So for a lot of people, it's kind of hard to distinguish what 10 grams of a macronutrient versus 15 grams versus 40 grams might mean for my individual health. So in an attempt to try to help with that, they have created this percent daily value column. And so it takes that gram, the gram amount in that serving, and it compares it to the recommended daily allowance or recommended daily intake of that nutrient. And it says, okay, in this food you will get 50% of your recommended daily allowance or intake, or you'll get 10% or whatever the percent may be. Now, the difficult part with this is there's recommended daily allowance and recommended daily intake. Typically, the RDA, the allowance, used if they're trying to say you should eat up to this amount but not over it. And then the recommended daily intake is more often used if people are trying to say like you should eat this amount or more. So that can get kind of confusing for some people. Whenever they see these percentages, they may or may not, well, here's a kitty. Sometimes people may or may not be clear on what that percentage really does mean. So how did they figure out what should be, so how did they figure out how many grams or micrograms or milligrams should we be eating in a given day? To me, this is where it all gets pretty complicated, and why I say, you know, eat until you're satisfied and maybe don't pay too much attention to all of this stuff. Because, have you ever heard the adage of one size fits all truly doesn't fit anybody? Because I think this is the perfect example of that. Is the amount of fat or protein or carbohydrates or even vitamin D or vitamin A or calcium is going to be Bye, kitty. Different depending on where you are in your life stage, what you are trying to accomplish, as in, are you training to run a marathon? Are you battling an illness, whether it's temporary or something a little bit more chronic? So these, percentages and recommendations, they're trying to use it as a communication tool, and a lot of times people unintentionally apply it to themselves individually without thinking about all of the other parts of their life that go into making decisions around food. So the percent daily values are based on the US RDA, which is the United States Recommended Daily Allowances. That was based on the National Academy of Sciences in 1968. I just wanted to make sure I got the year right there. So it was a USDA and HHS, Health and Human Services, collaboration to come up with guidelines for the American people. The dietary guidelines for Americans. So they took a lot of things into account. They took the Surgeon General's report and some studies, and they asked doctors and other healthcare professionals to collaborate. So every 5 years, they still review and revise these guidelines for dietary guidelines for Americans. And so there is definitely scientific studies and scientific information going into creating these guidelines. But Americans, that's a very, very diverse group. We're all very diverse in so many different ways. And so these guidelines aren't necessarily going to be appropriate for everybody. Now, in the most recent set of guidelines, they did create different sections for different phases of life. So early childhood, super important, right? Adolescence, and then adult, and if you are pregnant adult or breastfeeding adult, postmenopausal adult, or other elderly adult. What your body is going to want and use, and everything is going to change a lot through all of our phases of life. So it's good that they've broken it down somewhat, but there's still so much more that makes us unique people. So the big thing I want you to take away from this is that the dietary guidelines for Americans have to be broad in order for it to be, efficient in some way. They can't truly create personalized recommendations for each and every one of us. But remember, it's not personalized for you. So if you want to go, I'll have a link where you can go and access these guidelines. But remember, one size fits all does not fit anybody, and take your own personal uniqueness and circumstances into account whenever you're reading these guidelines, and adjust them for you. And listen to your body's internal cues. Okay, and there is a little note down at the bottom that talks about daily percent value. Tells you how much a nutrient in a serving of food contributes to a daily diet. 2,000 calories a day is used for general nutrition advice. Where do you think they got that 2,000 number from? The way it's stated, it kind of makes it seem as though most people should be targeting a 2,000 calorie diet, right? Well, in most cases, that's not enough food. That's not enough energy. So how did they get to 2,000? Well, first they started by asking in a survey how much people thought that they ate each day. So they used self-reported data. And oftentimes with self-reported data, it's not necessarily perfectly accurate, right? Think about, if someone just randomly asked you how many calories on average you ate in a day, you're probably going to kind of take a guess and may or may not be very close to the reality. And also, different days are different calories, right? Each and every day isn't a copy and paste of itself. So they started with the self-reported data and tried to find, a mean, a median, an average, and kind of look. And so they proposed 2,350 as somewhat of an average calories of what people self-reported that they ate. Now, 2350 is not a very nice round number, so they wanted to make it a round number. As far as I know, there was no strong scientific reason why they decided to round it down to 2,000 instead of, up to 2,500 or 2,400. But basically what they did is they were like, let's ask a bunch of people what they think they eat. Okay, let's try to find an average here. That kind of feels too high. Let's just round it down to a nice even number. Cool, we'll go with that. And we aren't trying to tell people to eat a 2,000 calorie diet, but 2,000 calories is easier for people to do the math off of. And it gives them some sort of reference point, and people will know that they can go up from there. Unfortunately, I think in the reality, a lot of people mistake this for a recommendation of eating just 2,000 calories. Okay, so I think that is one of the largest misconceptions with the nutrition data sheet, food labeling, is 2,000 calories is not the recommended amount of calories you should be eating per day. It's all very individual and unique, as I'm sure you're getting tired of hearing me say. So one size fits nobody. Remember. And really all of this leads to percent daily value sets us up to think about all of the food that we eat in like a plus or minus list for the day. As if the food I ate yesterday and the food I eat tomorrow won't interact with the food I eat today. Our digestive systems take several hours. The food that we eat continues to impact our bodies. So hyper-focusing on one day's food isn't representative of what's happening in our body. And I think that a lot of times we do hear messages about a day being ruined by a certain thing that we choose to eat, or as if this day we must eat everything that in our minds is the most nutrient dense or the most healthy possible, and if there's even one thing on that list that isn't super nutrient dense, then like nothing else matters. It just like cancels out everything. Or we can kind of flip that to, well, maybe I'm just going to eat junk food all day, so I'm going to intentionally choose less nutrient dense foods today, because if I'm going to eat one thing, I might as well just eat all of it as nutrient dense because the day is ruined. And to me, this is very dangerous thinking. It's super unrealistic to how our bodies process, digest food, and it invites more guilt and shame into our eating lives. That doesn't pair well with any meal. So I think if we can break out of this thinking of food as I have a day that I need to try to make as nutrient dense as possible, we think about it more as far as like, what does my body want today? And if I don't eat a bunch of calcium today, it doesn't mean that my bones are rotten overnight and I'm done. I can eat calcium tomorrow and the day after. And I think the more variety that we can incorporate into our food, we're gonna have another cat visit us, well, same cat, just the second time. The more variety that we can include in our food, the more fun that we can have with our food, and the more that we can listen to our own internal cues when we're deciding what to eat, it will actually make this whole meal planning, and it will make our whole relationship with food a lot more enjoyable. If you want to do additional research on your own, there are links in the description. If you have specific questions for me or want me to go any further in depth in any specific part, let me know in the comments. And please just remember that these nutrition data sheets, these labels, are intended to be tools and a reference point, but one size does not fit all, and these are not made specifically for you. So your individual body's needs may be very different than what is reflected on the label. Well, thank you for joining us today. Thank you, Chefeteers, and I hope that you can find joy in your relationship with food and bring some more joy, confidence, and creativity into your kitchen.